Today we feature the three musketeers, or perhaps mistreteers, of wanderlust. Teresa Rodriguez, host of the Where podcast, is joined by two fellow Bay Area-based travel writers, Kimberley Lovato and Jill Robinson, and all three ladies have gathered so many great experiences that hearing them together is a party. Kimberley Lovato is an award-winning author who writes about lifestyle, adventure, and great living in dozens of publications, including National Geographic Traveler, American Express Essentials, and most of the in-flight magazines that grace the seatback pockets of jetliners crisscrossing the skies. Jill Robinson is a resident of the San Francisco Writers Grotto and a member of the Society of American Travel Writers. She's held editorial positions at Travel Muse, Yahoo, Excite, CNET, and Hotwired, and just a few of the places her writing has appeared include The Robb Report, Sunset Magazine, Saturday Evening Post, Coastal Living, Men's Fitness, and Lonely Planet. It's a treat to hear these ladies discuss the best that the San Francisco Bay Area has to offer, and you're going to love this conversation. Again, joining Teresa Rodriguez, here are Kimberley Lovato and Jill Robinson.
You're listening to the Where Traveler podcast, the audio companion for Where Traveler magazine in print and online. For more information, go to wheretraveler.com. And now, Teresa Rodriguez, Editor-in-Chief for Where Traveler San Francisco.
Hi, this is Teresa Rodriguez with Where Traveler magazine, and I'm here, Jill Robinson and Kimberly Lovato. They are professional travel writers. Yep, they have scored the top dream job in the world. They have spent the past decade traveling the world, writing about their adventures, and getting paid. Both women are award-winning writers who have covered topics about travel for some of the top publications in the nation. And they have co-authored a book called 100 Things to Do in San Francisco Before You Die. Let's find out more about these travel-savvy duo. Hi, ladies.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy travel schedule to spend some time with Where Traveler. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. So how did you guys score the world's most wanted dream job? Jill, tell me about your process into the world of travel writing.
It's interesting and not a direct path. So I worked in performing arts and in tech before I became a full-time journalist. And ultimately, it was something that I was doing on the side while I was doing all these other jobs that took over really for me when I kind of merged out of tech and decided I wanted to approach doing this full time as a freelancer, which to many of our ears nowadays, you think, what kind of idiot are you to completely quit a job and to try to do this full time without benefits and all of that. But as you have said, this is the number one dream job. So, it works out.
That's so fantastic. I love it. And Kimberly.
Yeah, mine was a little bit more direct. So I worked for a local community newspaper in the early and mid 1990s, actually the Palo Alto Weekly, which is still there. And I started for them doing the cops and courts beat, which is really boring, but eventually moved up to covering arts and entertainment and that type of thing. But then we moved to Florida. And so I went completely freelance in 1999, back when, again, like Jill said, people thought you were crazy to leave a job. But I still wanted to keep writing, and I started writing for magazines, local magazines in Florida. And then when I moved to Europe, it just was a natural fit. I was living in Brussels, Belgium. People wanted to read about Brussels and Antwerp and places I was traveling in France. And I was thinking, wow, I can get paid for this. So yeah, I kind of fell into travel, not even really understanding that it was actually an aspect of journalism. I was working for a community newspaper.
That's so great. So, talking with both of you, and I know both of you well, what would you say what would be the top 3 traits that you have that would make you a great travel writer? So Jill, what are the top 3 traits that you have that really help you succeed in this industry?
I would say I'm an endlessly curious person. I always want to know the backstory to something. I am doggedly determined, and some people might say too much if they know me well. But I have a hard time putting something down. If I think it's interesting, I want to chase that story. And the third thing is I fairly organized, so I can keep track of what's going on, storylines in my head, interesting things, contacts, and being able to turn that around really quickly when you find something interesting is helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you, Kimberly?
Well, first and foremost, I get this question all the time from people who call me or write me and ask me, how do I become a travel writer? I love to travel, so I'd like to write about it. But first and foremost, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
I studied writing. I've been writing for the better part of 25 years. My dad is a writer. I read a lot. So first and foremost, I'm a writer and a reader. I had an editor tell me I'd rather have a writer that travelers than a traveler that writes. And that has always stuck with me. I'm curious about people and places like Des Moines, Iowa, where I'm calling from right now. I'm curious and legitimately, I think I'm positive. I think I can find the positivity in a place and try to find a good story. And to Jill's point, being organized is key. When you're a travel writer, you have a lot of times, you have many different balls in the air and you're juggling your invoices and pitches and deadlines. And it's tough to do, but
Yeah. So how much time would you say, Kimberly, that you spend traveling? And let's say a month. How many different destinations would you visit?
Oh, gosh. It really depends, Teresa. I've become much more selective in where I go. I mean, obviously, I would love to have an assignment before I go, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes I'm out doing some research. But on average, I would say 2 weeks a month, maybe I'm gone. Yeah. But then, for example, I decided to take a break from November to February and stayed home and got organized and pitched a lot of local stories about San Francisco. So it really just depends on my mood. Jill is one of the most active travel writers I know. So she's probably a good person to talk to on how often a travel writer has to be on the road.
I used to be out almost more than I was at home. However, I have a 9-year-old at home, and my husband, while he is incredibly supportive and just amazing at being able to deal without me when I need to get out of the house and go chase a story, I really try to not be gone more than a total of 2 weeks out of the month, and I can't say never, rarely consecutively 2 weeks. It would be like maybe 5 days in one place and 6 days somewhere else.
Yeah.
Something like that, so that I split it up a little bit so that he isn't just completely single parenting it all.
Right, got it.
It's definitely tough when you're a parent versus now my daughter's in college. So I feel like I have a little more freedom. But when my daughter was home, I wanted to be home with her too, just like Jill does.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I started Tango Diva, 15 years ago or whatever. And it was like, website for solo women travelers. And now I've got a 7-year-old. So there's no solo women traveling in my future. So yeah, I totally get it. So what do you guys travel with? Like, what are the must-haves that you keep on your personage when you go somewhere? Do you have like 5 things you always travel with? Jill?
Well, so I have some of the standard things. So, of course, my laptop and camera, because I'm documenting things while I'm traveling, and a notebook when I can't just be walking around the street with a laptop in my arm, typing things in, which is practical. Weird things that I bring along. I always bring along a lacrosse ball. It used to be a tennis ball. Now I've advanced to lacrosse ball. One of the non-glamorous things about traveling a lot is you're in different airplane chairs, you're carrying bags on shoulders and lugging them, you are sleeping in different beds, you are awake, asleep, all that kind of thing. And it can take a toll on your shoulders and neck. And so I use the ball to roll out my knotted muscles.
That is such a great idea. I'm taking that one. That's so good. And you, Kimberly, my dear?
Yeah, I'm kind of, maybe it's our age or something, but I'm kind of an advocate of the tennis ball thing, though I don't always remember it. But I always give that advice too, which is funny. I always, the usual stuff like Jill mentioned, but I also always bring a foldable, reusable bag because you never know. I use it for laundry. If I'm going to the market, I'm really, really try not to use plastic if I can. So always bring and if I buy a little extra something, I have an extra bag I can carry. And this is a weird one. This would be a good article. What weird things do travel writers take?
Right.
I always pack a headlamp.
Oh, wow. That is a great idea.
Most of the places I go, the power's not going to go out. But for example, when I was in Cuba, the power went out every single day, every single night. When I was in Mexico, the power went out, or there were no streetlights in the village we were staying in. So it just keeps my hands free. And of course, if there's an emergency, it's great. But I've never had to use it in emergency. It's really been for practicality. And when I was just recently in Panama, and I packed it and I didn't need it, but it was nice to know that it was there.
Oh, well, that is a great idea. I never thought of that one.
And they're lightweight and they don't take up a lot of space. So.
Wow. Okay. So I like that. Okay. So now I'm going to be traveling with a lacrosse ball and a headlamp.
Imagine what the TSA people are going to think.
Oh my gosh. Yes. As long as I don't have duct tape, then I'll be okay.
Okay. No plastic twist ties and duct tape.
Yeah, exactly. So can you fill our listeners in on some of the trends that are taking place in travel?
Oh, God.
Jill, do you want to go first?
Sure. One of the things that isn't new, but is popping up a lot more across a lot of coverage in travel, and especially with millennials leading a lot of travel decisions, the whole thing for experiential travel has gotten way more popular. So I know we throw a lot of words around sometimes, but experiential travel is the more than merely hopping on the bus and hopping off and looking at the thing, staying in people's homes, having dinners in people's homes, not just watching the artisan make the thing, but lending your hand to help the artisan make the thing, going to scan and gather food for a particular dinner, those types of things that really allow travelers to get deeper in the place.
Right. That's fantastic. And Kimberly?
Yeah, definitely experiential travel is still a growing segment, but also I think people are very concerned, as I am, about the environment and the planet. And I think people are paying attention to ecological impacts of their travel, and often sometimes doing ecological or educational tours that are coming more in demand, and understanding how to protect the future, and how tours that maybe use the proceeds of the tour to help fund projects like that, I think are growing. I'm seeing a lot of that even in the luxury space, which is interesting as well. Zero footprint type travel.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because I did go to Fiji to Yakusto's Son's Resort, and they had a whole eco thing. Mm-hmm. That's where Fiji water comes from, right?
Right.
But you don't think about all the bottles that are created to hold the Fijian water. And so we ended up going to this little marshland where all the bottles, just the way the tide, ebbed and flowed, that all the bottles got stuck there. And so, we helped clean out the bottles, and, that's such an interesting part, because we think of a beautiful place like Fiji, right? Mm-hmm. And then we remember that commercial side of it, which is Fiji water, which we all love. And, the process of making plastic to support that product. So that's really, really interesting. On that note, what are some of your favorite destinations, my dears?
This is always it's such a popular question that we get asked, and it's hard to answer. And I know it sounds really cliche, but I really do fall a little bit in love with everywhere I go. And I think it's just my positive attitude. I really do try to see the good side of places, once you meet local people and have a great local experience. But I'm also a creature of habit. So I travel in France 4 months a year. So I pitch France a lot. And honestly, I love my hometown of San Francisco. It's a popular place for people to visit from around the world. And I love when I'm home trying to get out in my own backyard and discovering San Francisco. So those are a couple of my favorite places. So many. Panama, I just fell in love with Panama again 2 weeks ago, even though I'd been there 3 years ago. And so. Yeah,
what's going on in Panama right now?
Panama City is a great city. It's celebrating 500 years this year. So there's a lot growing there. The old city's getting restored. 10 years ago, you couldn't have gone to the old Casco Viejo of Panama City. It was run down and crime ridden. And now it's home to galleries, and some of the best chefs in the country are setting up there. And it's basically transforming. So plus it's just really lovely Latin American hospitality and warm weather. And, you've got the Panama Canal, of course. So it's a nonstop flight from San Francisco. So it's great.
Wow, I didn't realize it was nonstop.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I wrote, Fly Solo, the 50 best places for a girl to travel alone, I broke down, cultural opportunities, activity level, weather preference, and social interaction because, I think, sometimes you want to go to a place that's really culturally engaging, while other times you just want some warm weather and you don't want to learn anything about where you visit, where you're going, right? So I think it's also, really great to think about
I agree.
what you want to experience. Wouldn't you say, Jill?
Similar to Kimberly, I really try to find what makes each place stand out from the others when I'm traveling, because it's just so much nicer and much more pleasurable to find a positive experience. I would say New Orleans is a special place for me. I've gone, I don't know, maybe 50 times since Katrina and a few times before that. But it is always a place that once I get off the plane, I feel instantly at home. And Kimberly mentioned San Francisco also. So I grew up in the Bay Area, and it is such a pleasure to come back from a trip to a place that you love also. So, sometimes you think, I'm in this wonderful place and now I have to get on the plane and get back home. Bummer. But it's so nice to come back to San Francisco. And clearly a lot of visitors believe so as well, because San Francisco tourism just released tourism figures for last year, for 2018, and it was up to 25.8 million visitors in that year, which is more than a % uptick.
Right. It's so incredible how many people come to San Francisco. And on that note, let's talk about your book. So these two fantastic women co-authored the second edition of 100 Things to Do in San Francisco Before You Die. So ladies, how was it to co-author a book together?
I thought it was great. I mean, it came about because I had written a book a year prior called Unique Eats and Eateries of San Francisco. And
I'm still going through that one, I have to say.
You better go through quickly. San Francisco places close quickly.
I know. And they change. It's so funny that you should say that, because I did. I went to 1300 and then the next week it was closed. So but everybody, that is such a great book. I really highly recommend that book. And I'm sure that Kimberly is going to update it, but it's called Unique Eats.
Thank you so much. When the publisher approached me about redoing the second edition of 100 Things in San Francisco, I said, yes, I'd love to do it, but I'd love to bring in my friend Jill, A, because she grew up in the Bay Area, but B, it's nice to be able to help promote it with someone else. And also, we both have different perspectives on what we think is great about San Francisco. I mean, I'm kind of a food lover and Jill's an adventurer, but it was great to work on it together, especially with a friend. So we had a great time.
I was very thankful, and I am very thankful that Kimberly involved me in this. And I think I agree. It's nice to collaborate with someone else, because you have an image in your mind of what you think are the best either known or not so well known places in the city. But it's nice to bounce those ideas off of someone else who has a little bit of different experience, because there's always something you're going to learn that way as well.
Yeah. So how did you do that? Did you have a ranking system or criteria that you guys, sat down with 3 bottles of Chardonnay and, decide like, okay, this is how we're going to move forward with this? Or what was the strategy behind writing a book like this together?
We needed to have the wine, Kimberly. That's the problem.
Yes, that's the problem. Well, so that was, Teresa, that was the hardest part about writing this book. Writing this book is what to include. I mean, obviously, San Francisco you could have 1,000 things you should do. And there's really no ranking. Yeah. Number 1 doesn't mean it's the top, and number 100 doesn't mean it's the bottom. We just had to put 100 in. The publisher dictated what sections they went into. So they actually determined the order, not us, but there's no ranking in it. But when we started, we basically put together a big spreadsheet, and I think we might have had like 150 or 160 places, Jill. I can't remember. And we just really... Yeah, it was hard because every place is worthy. So we had to keep in the highlights. I mean, you're not going to write a book about San Francisco and not put in the Golden Gate Bridge, right? But we really did try to also mix in some surprises for locals, so that it wasn't just for people who'd never been here. It's for people who are here and don't explore their backyard enough, or maybe people who live in Marin or out in Sacramento and are visiting for the weekend. So we really tried to keep that in the back of our minds as well.
Yeah, that's, I think, I love some of these. It's like play a game at Museum Mécanique. And that was one of the places that we grew up with, right? And I love the fact that you included that, because it is kind of a place that you walk into and going, where am I? Right? And unless somebody tells you to go there, you would not go into this warehouse that's at the end of, Fisherman's Wharf. So let's talk about the things that had to be tossed or not included and how you guys decided that. So is there one of the things, Jill, that you wanted to include that Kimberly was like, no, we can't include that? Or the publisher's like, no, that's got to get scrapped?
I don't think, first of all, I don't have memory of exact things that either of us thought should be included and the other one nixed. I think it was more of a situation where, it was really hard to finally say, okay, that's it. We're done with the 100. This is the 100, because we would come up with the 100 and then one of us would say, oh, wait, we totally forgot this one thing. And the other would say, oh yeah, that's really important. But then our argument for each other was, is this more important than any of the other things on the list? So we would allow something from outside to trump something on the 100 if it was more important. But more than likely, our answer was, well, shoot, no, it's not more important, but it can be connected in this thematic way. And so that's why we always say the book says 100 things, but it's really more like 160 things.
Exactly.
Because we cram in a whole bunch of other tips and other ideas.
Yeah, we did cheat a little bit. We it's 100 things in the table of content, but we put in tips and facts and lists, of where to go, even in one heading. So we really did try to include as many as we could.
Yeah. So I'm just going to give our listeners, there's food and drink, music and entertainment, sports and recreation, culture and history, and shopping and fashion are the different topics that they cover. And they also have suggested itineraries and activities by season, which is super awesome. I think that's just a brilliant idea, especially when you're coming to San Francisco. So do you guys have any, regarding like pre-travel plans? I'm kind of just jumping the rail right here with respects to our Where Traveler listener, because now we've just got them super excited about coming to San Francisco. So they're all going to be booking their trips. Do you have some pre-travel plans let's talk about San Francisco specifically? What would you recommend? And besides packing a sweater.
Exactly. I was just going to say that, Teresa, always pack a sweater, because San Francisco, you never know. It could be 80 degrees and the next thing you know, Carl the Fog comes rolling in and you're buying one of those I Heart San Francisco sweatshirts because you didn't pack a sweater.
And anybody, what else? What are some other items? I say good walking shoes.
Good walking shoes, but also one of the things about San Francisco is that it can be a very walkable city. But for those who have issues walking distances or walking up the many, many hills of San Francisco, we have a pretty good public transportation system when you factor in all the small things. So, you've got buses, you've got the streetcars, you've got BART, you've got Muni, you've got cable cars, and then of course you have rideshare and other ways to get around. So I would say don't feel bad if you don't want to pack, big walking shoes because you have mobility issues or something like that. There is a way to get to wherever you need to get in the city.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, if you only had 72 hours in San Francisco, Kimberly, what would be the highlights? What would you suggest to a listener?
Yeah, if you've never been here, I definitely suggest the cable cars. I suggest a little browse through the ferry building, definitely a walk along Crissy Field, because I think that's the best place to take a family photo of the Golden Gate Bridge, a stroll through the Presidio if you can, or even a drive through. And then, maybe I love going to Golden Gate Park. I think it's such a respite in the city. And I mean, honestly, you could spend 72 hours, I feel like, in Golden Gate Park between the museums and the paths and the parks, and then it goes all the way out to the beach. So those would be some of my highlights.
Yeah, and I just want, one tip for our listeners is the Hyde Powell line is the most popular line on the cable car. Mm-hmm. And, make sure that you talk with your concierge about the timing of getting there, because you can end up spending 2 hours in line to catch the cable car up the hill. That is the iconic rice-a-roni shot that everybody wants. So there's two different locations where they can catch it. Ding, ding, ding. And I mean, it's worth it. I love it. I even take my daughter on the cable car now. So yeah, that's a really, really great one is the cable car. It is worth it, but it's not necessarily worth the 2 hours in freezing cold, foggy weather. And remember, it's a $7 a fee. It's not part of the Muni system where you can just write it for $250 for the day. And how about you,
Well, I
Jill?
echo all those ideas. So darn it, Kimberly, you took them from me. But
well, I would have said China. I should have said Chinatown too. I think Chinatown in San Francisco, and of course eating.
Eating, yes, I was going to say
eating and drinking for sure. But one other addition that I would say is important if you can work it into your schedule for a short visit is get out on the water if the weather is good, because just seeing San Francisco from the water perspective, as well as the fact that a lot of the city's history is tied to the shoreline, it's just a nice kind of different thing to do and a good different way to look at the city.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and it's really it's actually a pretty inexpensive ride if you want to not do an actual tour, but just take a ferry over to Sausalito and back, and they have a bar on board, so that's a lovely little treat. Or if they want to, rent a bike and ride it across the Golden Gate Bridge and down to Sausalito, get an ice cream, and then put the bike on the ferry and come back that way as well. I think that's just such a perfect afternoon. Yeah.
It's great. And you know what I noticed in Sausalito now is you don't even have to put the bikes back on the ferry. They're collecting them over there now. So if you just want to ride one way and continue on in Marin or stay in Sausalito for dinner and catch a ride back, you don't have to be responsible to get your bikes back now.
Yeah. So I think it's like a $10 fee, and there's companies like Blazing Saddles that just ask them when you rent your bike. And what's also good is that a lot of the bikes that they have are electronic, so you don't have to do all of that pedaling up the hill. That they're a little supportive. So yeah, that's great for people who want to ride across the Golden Gate Bridge, but not necessarily burn all of those calories. Well, I just want to thank you, ladies, for spending some time with us this afternoon with Where Traveler and sharing your insights and your secrets. Is there any last words of wisdom that you would like to give our listeners
I think
today?
with regard to San Francisco, that it's just one thing to remember is there's always an opportunity to come back. And there are so many things to do that hit all sorts of different preferences for people, whether it's history and culture, whether it's food and drink, whether it's getting outdoors or finding quirky histories of San Francisco, of which there's many. So I think the thing is just that it's a great city to revisit and always seem like you're finding something new.
Yes, I agree. And Kimberly?
Yeah, I echo that as far as San Francisco. It's, you could spend, your whole vacation in the city itself, but it's also a great hopping off point for discovering a lot of beautiful places in Northern California. And we include that in our book as well. Just great day trips from the city. And you could be in the Redwoods, the wine country, down in Half Moon Bay, kayaking, or, all the way down to Carmel, driving along 17-mile drive. And it's all easy, done in a day trips. And San Francisco is great for that as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I echo what both of you say. And also, listeners, if you want to find out more about San Francisco, you can go to wheretraveler.com/SF, and we have itineraries there and different exciting ideas for your travel plans to San Francisco. So, ladies, I would like to thank you for being on board today, and safe travels.
Yeah, thank you very much
for having us.
Thank you, listeners, for joining me. You've been listening to the Where Traveler podcast, hosted by me, Teresa Rodriguez. This episode was produced and directed by Pete A. Turner, John Leon Guerrero, and Victoria Shepard. To listen to this podcast, find out more information about the crew, as well as Where Traveler, visit wheretraveler.com, your ultimate destination guide.